The ice cracked beneath her feet like a gunshot echoing across the frozen landscape. And Beatrice Fitzgerald knew in that instant she was going to die in the coldest water she had ever seen. The winter of 1881 had transformed Arizona Territory into something unrecognizable, at least to those who thought the desert never saw snow. But here in the high country near Clifton, nestled in the mountains where copper veins ran deep through the earth, winter came harsh and unforgiving. The San Francisco River had frozen over in patches, deceptive sheets of ice that looked solid but hid treacherous currents beneath. Beatrice had been foolish to try crossing, but the alternative meant adding 3 miles to her journey back to town, and darkness was coming fast. She had spent the day at the Henderson Ranch delivering medicine to their youngest daughter, who had taken ill with fever. As the town's only trained nurse, such trips fell to her, and she never complained. At 22 years old, she had already seen more suffering than most people twice her age, having spent 2 years working in a Philadelphia hospital before the desert air called her west for her own health. The ice gave way completely, and she plunged into water so cold it stole the breath from her lungs. Her heavy wool coat, so necessary against the mountain wind, now pulled her down like an anchor. She tried to scream, but the shock of the cold made her body seize up. Her fingers scrabbled uselessly at the edge of the ice, which broke away in chunks each time she grasped it. This was how it ended then. Alone in a frozen river, miles from anyone who might hear her cries. Her father back in Philadelphia had been right. The West was no place for a woman alone. But her father had been wrong about many things. Through the roaring in her ears and the desperate thunder of her own heartbeat, she heard something else. Hoofbeats, fast ones. Then a voice, deep and commanding, "Hold on, do not fight the current." She could not have fought anything if she wanted to. Her limbs were already going numb, her movements sluggish and uncoordinated. She caught a glimpse of a figure on horseback, a dark silhouette against the pale winter sky. Then a rope hit the water near her, and she heard the voice again. "Grab the rope. Grab it now." Some survival instinct deeper than conscious thought made her hands move. Her fingers, stiff and clumsy, closed around the rough hemp. She felt it tighten, felt herself being pulled through the water. The ice scraped against her face, her shoulder, but then she was being dragged up onto thicker ice, and then onto the snowy bank. The man who had pulled her out moved with swift efficiency. He dismounted in one fluid motion and was kneeling beside her before she could even focus on his face. Strong hands stripped off her sodden coat. "We need to get you warm, right now." I can," she tried to speak, but her teeth were chattering so violently she could barely form words. "Hush now, do not waste your strength talking." He pulled off his own heavy sheepskin coat and wrapped it around her. It was warm from his body heat, and she instinctively burrowed into it. Then he was lifting her, carrying her as easily as if she weighed nothing at all, and setting her on his horse. He mounted behind her, one arm tight around her waist, and spurred the horse into a gallop. Beatrice had never been held by a man like this, pressed against his chest as they rode. Even through her diminishing consciousness, she was aware of the solid warmth of him, the strength in the arm that kept her from falling. She let her head fall back against his shoulder, too exhausted and cold to maintain any semblance of propriety. "Stay with me," he said, his voice rumbling through his chest into her back. "We are almost there. Stay awake." She tried. She truly did, but the darkness pulled at her and she let it win. When Beatrice opened her eyes, she was lying on a bed she did not recognize, covered in heavy quilts, with a fire roaring in a stone fireplace across the room. Her clothes were gone, replaced by a man's flannel shirt that hung almost to her knees. For a moment, Panic seized her, but then she noticed her undergarments were still in place beneath the shirt, and her dress was hanging near the fire to dry. "You are awake. Good." She turned her head to see him sitting in a chair near the bed, and for the first time, she got a proper look at the man who had saved her life. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of storm clouds. His face was lean and weathered in the way of men who spent their lives outdoors, but handsome in a rough-hewn way. He wore dark trousers and a simple shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle. There was a wariness in his expression, a guardedness that suggested he was not accustomed to company. "How long was I unconscious?" she asked. Her voice came out hoarse, her throat raw. "About an hour. I was starting to worry." He stood and moved to a small table, returning with a cup of something steaming. "Drink this. It is just tea with honey, but it will help warm you from the inside." She struggled to sit up and he helped her, adjusting the pillows behind her back with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his rough exterior. She took the cup in both hands, savoring the warmth that seeped into her palms. "Thank you," she said. "You saved my life. You already thanked me 3 times while you were half-conscious during the ride here." A faint blush crept into her cheeks. "I do not remember that. I am not surprised. You were in bad shape." He returned to his chair, but he sat on the edge of it, as if ready to spring into action if needed. "What were you doing out there alone? That ice was not safe." "I was coming back from the Henderson ranch. Their daughter was sick. I am a nurse." His eyebrows rose slightly. "You are Beatrice Fitzgerald. I have heard of you." "You have. You are fairly well known in Clifton." "The nurse who came from back east. Some folks think you are crazy for riding out to tend to people at all hours." "And what do you think?" He considered this. "I think you are either very brave or very foolish. Perhaps both." She took a sip of the tea, studying him over the rim of the cup. "You have the advantage of me, sir. You know my name, but I do not know yours." "Zachary Young. I run the ZY Ranch about 5 miles north of town. Cattle mostly, though I am building up a horse breeding operation as well." The name rang a bell. She had heard it mentioned in town, though always with a certain tone she could not quite decipher. Respect, certainly, but something else too. Curiosity, perhaps, or wariness. "I owe you my life, Mr. Young." "Zachary, and you owe me nothing. Anyone would have done the same." "That is not true, and we both know it." She set the cup down on the small table beside the bed. "Many people would have ridden right past, not wanting to risk themselves. You went into that water for me. I did not go in. I stayed on solid ground and used the rope. You know what I mean." He stood abruptly, moving to the window. "The snow is starting up again. You will need to stay here tonight. The storm is going to get worse before it gets better, and you are in no condition to travel." Beatrice knew he was right, but the impropriety of the situation struck her nonetheless. "I cannot possibly impose on you like that. You are not imposing. You are recovering from nearly freezing to death. There is a difference." He turned to face her, his expression stern. "I will sleep in the barn with the horses. You will have the cabin to yourself. In the morning, if the weather clears, I will take you back to town." "That is very kind of you. It is practical." But there was something in his eyes that softened the brusque words. He fed her more tea, then a simple but hearty stew that warmed her from the inside out. As the evening wore on, she found herself watching him move around the cabin. He was economical in his movements, nothing wasted, everything purposeful. The cabin itself was small but well-maintained, everything in its place. There were books on a shelf near the fireplace, which surprised her. She had not expected a solitary rancher to be a reader. "You have quite a library," she observed. He glanced at the books. "Winter nights get long out here. A man needs something to occupy his mind." "What do you read?" "Shakespeare, Dickens." Whatever I can get my hands on when I make it to Tucson or Santa Fe." He seemed almost embarrassed by the admission. "I love to read," she said. "I brought 3 trunks of books with me when I came west. My father thought I was insane, but I could not bear to leave them behind." "Your father is back east, Philadelphia. He is a physician. He wanted me to marry a colleague of his, a surgeon named Robert Ashworth. Very successful, very wealthy, very boring." She stopped, surprised at her own candor. Perhaps it was the near-death experience that loosened her tongue. "So you came west instead?" "I came west for my health initially. I had a lung condition and the doctors recommended the dry air, but I stayed because I found I could do real good here. Back in Philadelphia, I was just my father's daughter, expected to pour tea and make polite conversation. Here I am needed, I make a difference." Zachary was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I understand that, the wanting to be more than what people expect of you. Is that why you are out here alone?" His jaw tightened. "That is a story for another time. You should rest now. You have been through an ordeal." She recognized the dismissal for what it was, a closing of a door she had inadvertently opened, but she was too tired to press. Her body ached, and despite the warmth of the fire and the quilts, she felt chilled deep in her bones. Zachary banked the fire and checked that she had everything she needed. Then, with a quiet good night, he left the cabin, heading out into the snowy darkness toward the barn. Beatrice lay awake for a while, listening to the wind howl around the cabin walls and the soft patter of snow against the windows. She thought about the man who had saved her, about the sadness she had seen flickering in his eyes when she asked about his solitude. She thought about the strength in his arms as he had pulled her from the water, the gentleness in his hands as he had helped her with the tea. She thought about how her life had been saved today, and how strange it was that she felt more alive now, lying in the cabin of a stranger, than she had felt in all her years in Philadelphia society. Morning came with a pale, watery sunlight that filtered through the cabin windows. Beatrice woke to find Zachary already inside, building up the fire. Her dress was dry, folded neatly on the chair where he had been sitting the night before. "Good morning," she said, sitting up carefully. Her body protested with aches and pains, but she felt considerably better than she had the previous evening. "Morning. How are you feeling?" "Sore, tired, but alive thanks to you," he nodded. "I will step outside while you dress. Take your time. I have made coffee and there are biscuits if you are hungry." Once she was dressed, though her fingers fumbled with the buttons and her movements were stiff, she opened the door to let him know it was safe to return. They ate breakfast in a companionable silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the occasional comment about the weather. "The storm has passed," Zachary said, looking out the window. "The ride back to town should be manageable, though we will need to take it slow. The ground is icy." "I appreciate you taking me back. I am sure you have work to do here." "The work will keep. Making sure you get home safely is more important." They set out an hour later, Beatrice riding on the saddle in front of Zachary just as she had the day before, though this time she was conscious enough to feel the full awkwardness of their proximity. She tried to hold herself stiff, not leaning back against him, but the horse's gait and her own weakness made it impossible to maintain the distance. "You can relax," Zachary said quietly. "I am not going to let you fall." So she did, allowing herself to rest against the solid warmth of his chest. It felt strangely natural, as if she had been doing it all her life. As they rode, he told her about his ranch, about the harsh winter and how it had affected his cattle. She told him about some of her patients in town, the challenges of practicing medicine with limited supplies in a rough mining town. The conversation flowed easily, neither of them seeming to notice when topics shifted and changed. When Clifton came into view, Beatrice felt an odd pang of disappointment. The ride had been pleasant, and she found herself reluctant for it to end. Zachary brought the horse to a stop at the edge of town. "Where do you live?" "I have a small house on Copper Street, near the church." "But you can let me down here. I can walk the rest of the way." "Absolutely not. I will take you to your door." He did just that, ignoring the curious stares of the townspeople who saw them ride past. Beatrice could already hear the gossip starting, but she found she did not care as much as she should have. At her door, Zachary dismounted and helped her down. His hands lingered on her waist for just a moment longer than necessary, and she found herself looking up into those storm-gray eyes. "Thank you again, Zachary, for everything. You are welcome, Beatrice." He stepped back, putting proper distance between them. "Take care of yourself. No more crossing frozen rivers." "I will do my best." She hesitated, then added, "Will I see you again?" Something flickered in his expression. "Hope, perhaps, or pleasure. I come into town for supplies every couple of weeks. I suppose our paths might cross." "I suppose they might." He tipped his hat to her, mounted his horse, and rode away. Beatrice stood in her doorway, watching until he disappeared from view. The next 3 days were a blur of activity. Word had spread about her accident, and a steady stream of concerned townspeople stopped by to check on her. She reassured them all that she was fine, though her body still ached and she tired easily. What she did not mention to anyone was how often her thoughts drifted to Zachary Young, to the quiet strength of him, to the unexpected connection she had felt during their time together. On the 4th day, a knock at her door revealed a young boy she recognized as working at the general store. "Package for you, Miss Fitzgerald," he said, handing her a wrapped parcel. Inside, she found a beautiful wool shawl in a deep blue color, along with a note in neat, masculine handwriting. "To replace the one you lost in the river. Stay warm. Zachary Young." She ran her fingers over the soft wool, a smile spreading across her face. The shawl was finer than anything she could have afforded on her modest income, clearly chosen with care. She wrapped it around her shoulders immediately and wore it every day after that. 2 weeks passed before she saw him again. She was at the general store buying medical supplies when she heard his voice behind her. "Miss Fitzgerald." She turned, her heart doing an odd little jump in her chest. He stood just inside the doorway, hat in hand, looking as rough and handsome as she remembered. "Mr. Young, what a pleasant surprise." "Zachary," he corrected gently. "I am in town for supplies. I saw you come in and thought I should say hello." "I am glad you did." She touched the shawl she wore. "Thank you for this. It is beautiful, though you should not have spent so much. I owed you a shawl. The old one was ruined because of the river." "The old one was ruined because I was foolish enough to walk on unstable ice. That was hardly your fault." He smiled then, a rare and devastating expression that transformed his serious face. "Are you always this stubborn about accepting gifts, only when I feel they are undeserved? Then I am glad this one was deserved." They stood there, smiling at each other like fools, until the shopkeeper cleared his throat meaningfully behind them. "I should finish my shopping," Beatrice said reluctantly, "and I should start mine. But perhaps, before I head back to the ranch, you might join me for coffee at the hotel restaurant." It was a bold invitation, one that would certainly fuel more gossip, but Beatrice did not hesitate. "I would like that very much." They met an hour later, sitting across from each other at a small table by the window. The coffee was mediocre at best, but Beatrice barely noticed. She was too absorbed in the conversation, in learning more about this man who had saved her life. He told her about growing up in Texas, about learning ranching from his father before a fever had taken both his parents when he was 19. About drifting for a few years, working various ranches, before settling in Arizona and starting his own operation. "It has been 5 years now," he said. 5 years of building something that is mine. It is not much yet, but it will be. I have plans for breeding horses, quality stock that can handle this rough country. It will take time, but I am patient. You must be lonely out there by yourself." He looked down at his coffee cup. "Sometimes. But loneliness is better than being with the wrong people." "That sounds like the voice of experience." "Perhaps." He met her eyes. "What about you? Are you lonely? A woman alone in a rough town like this?" "Sometimes," she echoed his word. "But I have my work, and that is fulfilling. I feel useful here in a way I never did back east." "Your father must miss you. He writes every month, begging me to come home, but this is home now. I cannot imagine going back to that life." They talked until the coffee was cold and the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. When Zachary finally said he needed to head back to the ranch before full dark, Beatrice felt that same pang of disappointment she had experienced at the end of their first ride together. "May I call on you again?" he asked as they stood outside the hotel. "The next time I am in town. I would be disappointed if you did not." Over the following weeks, Zachary found more and more reasons to come to town. Sometimes it was for supplies he genuinely needed. Sometimes it was to sell cattle or horses. And sometimes, Beatrice suspected, it was just to see her. They fell into a pattern. He would stop by her house, and if she was not attending to a patient, they would walk together through town, talking about everything and nothing. When the weather was decent, they would ride out to a spot he knew along the river, far from the place where she had nearly drowned, and have picnics that consisted of simple food made extraordinary by the company. Beatrice found herself falling for him in a way she had never experienced before. Robert Ashworth back in Philadelphia had courted her properly, with flowers and poetry and declarations, but she had never felt more than a mild affection for him. With Zachary, everything was different. The way her pulse quickened when she saw him. The way she caught herself looking for him in crowds. The way his rare smiles made her feel like the sun had come out from behind clouds. But Zachary, despite his obvious affection for her, never spoke of his feelings, never did more than help her onto her horse or offer his arm as they walked. He was unfailingly proper, almost maddeningly so. It was in early April, when the snow had melted and wildflowers were starting to bloom in the high meadows, that everything changed. Beatrice had been called out to a ranch even more remote than Zachary's. A woman was in labor, her first child, and having difficulties. Beatrice had stayed for 20 hours straight, seeing both mother and baby through the ordeal. By the time she started back to town, she was exhausted, barely able to stay in the saddle. She was still miles from Clifton when her horse stepped in a prairie dog hole and went lame. Beatrice dismounted, assessed the situation, and knew she would have to walk the horse back slowly. It would take hours, and night was coming on. She had been walking for perhaps 30 minutes when she heard hoofbeats behind her. She turned to see Zachary riding hard in her direction. He reined in beside her, his face tight with worry. "Beatrice, Tom Henderson came by my place, said you had been at the Morrison Ranch for a birth. When I realized how late it was getting, I came looking for you. My horse is lame. I am walking him back." Zachary was off his horse in an instant, examining her mare's leg. "This is going to take hours. You can barely stand as it is." "I will manage. I always do." "You do not have to manage alone." He looked up at her, and there was something new in his expression, something fierce and tender all at once. "Let me help you, please." So she did. He ponied her lame horse behind his, and she rode with him, cradled against his chest in what had become a familiar position. But this time felt different. This time, His arm around her waist tightened, and she let herself sink into his embrace without any pretense of maintaining distance. "You are going to work yourself to death," he said quietly as they rode through the gathering dusk. "Running all over the county at all hours, taking care of everyone but yourself. That is my job. It does not have to be all you do." He was quiet for a moment, then continued, his voice rough. "These past months, getting to know you, spending time with you, it has meant everything to me. You have to know that." Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could feel it. "It has meant everything to me too. When I pulled you from that river when I thought you might die, something inside me shifted. And every day since then, every conversation we have had, every moment we have spent together, has only made it stronger." Made what stronger? She needed to hear him say it. He pulled the horse to a stop. In the fading light, his eyes were dark and intense. "What I feel for you, this overwhelming, all-consuming thing that I am fairly certain is love, though I have never felt anything like it before." Joy burst through her, bright and brilliant. "Zachary, I know I am not the man your father would have chosen for you. I am just a rancher trying to build something out of dust and determination. I cannot offer you the life you could have had back east, with fine houses and society parties. But I can offer you my heart, completely and without reservation. I can offer you a partnership, a life built together. I can offer you love that will last until my dying day." She reached up, touching his face with her hand. "I do not want what my father would have chosen. I want what I choose. And I choose you, Zachary Young. I choose this life, this rough and beautiful country, and you, always you." He kissed her then, there on his horse with the desert spreading out around them and the first stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. It was not her first kiss. Robert had claimed that honor with a chaste peck at a Christmas party years ago, but it was her first real kiss. The kind that made her understand what all the poets had been writing about. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Zachary rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "Be my wife, share your life with me." "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Yes to all of it." They were married 6 weeks later, in the small church in Clifton with most of the town in attendance. Beatrice wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair. Zachary wore his best suit, looking uncomfortable in the formal clothes, but so handsome it made her breath catch. The ceremony was short and sweet, the preacher keeping his remarks brief at their request. When Zachary kissed her as his wife, there were cheers and whoops from the assembled townspeople. The reception was held at the hotel, with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the night. Beatrice danced with her husband, with the shopkeeper, with the blacksmith, with everyone who asked. But it was Zachary's arms she wanted to be in, and she kept finding her way back to him. As the evening wore on and the guests began to drift away, Zachary leaned down to whisper in her ear. "Ready to go home, wife?" The words sent a thrill through her. "More than ready, husband." They rode out to the ranch under a sky full of stars, Beatrice sitting sideways on the saddle in front of Zachary, his arms around her. It was the same position they had been in so many times before, but everything was different now. Now she was riding toward her future, toward the life they would build together. The cabin looked the same as it had that first night when he had brought her there half frozen from the river. But now it was not a stranger's refuge. It was home. Zachary carried her over the threshold, a tradition he insisted on despite her laughing protests. He set her down gently in front of the fireplace, where a fire was already crackling. Someone, probably one of his ranch hands, had been by to prepare the cabin for their arrival. "I have something for you," he said, moving to the bedroom and returning with a wooden box. Inside was a string of pearls, lustrous and beautiful. "Zachary, these must have cost a fortune." "They were my mother's. My father gave them to her on their wedding day. I want you to have them now." She turned so he could fasten them around her neck, the pearls cool against her skin. Then she turned back to face him, reaching up to loosen his tie. "I love you," she said softly. "I have loved you since the moment you pulled me from that river, though it took me time to understand what I was feeling." "I love you," he replied, his hands coming up to frame her face. "You are the bravest, strongest, most stubborn woman I have ever known, and I thank God every day that you were foolish enough to walk on that ice." She laughed, and then he was kissing her again, and there were no more words for a very long time. The next months were an adjustment, learning to live together and merge their lives. Beatrice continued her nursing work, though now she had to balance it with running the ranch household. Zachary was patient with her learning curve when it came to cooking and cleaning, never complaining when dinner was burned or the house was less than tidy. "I married you for you, not for your domestic skills," he would say whenever she apologized. "If I wanted a housekeeper, I would have hired one." She, in turn, learned about ranching. She learned to ride better, learned to help with the horses, learned which cattle were good breeders and which needed to be sold off. Zachary was a good teacher, patient and thorough, and she was a quick study. But it was the nights she treasured most, when the work was done and they could sit together by the fire, reading or talking or simply being in each other's presence. Sometimes Zachary would read aloud to her, his deep voice bringing Shakespeare or Dickens to life. Sometimes she would tell him about her day, about the patients she had seen or the medical puzzles she was trying to solve. "You should think about training others," Zachary said one night as she recounted a difficult childbirth she had attended. "There is a need for more medical help in this area. You could teach other women what you know." It was an idea that took root in her mind. Over the following weeks, she began to plan, and by summer's end, she had started holding informal classes in town for women who wanted to learn basic nursing skills. It was fulfilling in a new way, passing on her knowledge and creating a network of caregivers who could help the growing community. Their first winter together was hard. The snow came early and heavy, isolating the ranch for weeks at a time. But Beatrice discovered that she did not mind the isolation when she was with Zachary. They made their own entertainment, playing cards and chess, cooking elaborate meals together, making love in front of the fire while the wind howled outside. It was during that winter that she first suspected she might be pregnant. She waited a few more weeks to be sure before telling Zachary, wanting to give him the news on his birthday in February. She made his favorite dinner, a beef stew with dumplings that she had finally learned to make properly, and baked a cake. After they had eaten, she handed him a small wrapped package. Inside was a tiny pair of knitted booties. He looked at them in confusion for a moment, then understanding dawned in his eyes. "Beatrice, are you telling me what I think you are telling me? You are going to be a father, in late summer if my calculations are correct." He let out a whoop of joy and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was breathless and laughing. Then he set her down gently, suddenly cautious. "Should I not have done that? Is it safe? Are you all right?" "I am fine. I am a nurse, remember. I will let you know if you need to be careful." He kept his hand on her still flat stomach, wonder in his expression. "A baby, our baby. Are you happy?" Happy does not begin to cover it. He kissed her softly. "You have given me everything, Beatrice. A home, a family, a future. You saved me just as surely as I saved you from that river." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Beatrice found it strange to be the patient rather than the caregiver. She continued her nursing work through the spring and into the early summer, finally stopping only when the late pregnancy made riding difficult. She had planned to deliver the baby herself, with Zachary's help. But when her labor started on a hot August afternoon, it became clear that something was not quite right. The baby was breech, and despite her medical knowledge, Beatrice found herself frightened in a way she had never been when helping other women through labor. Zachary, seeing her fear, made a decision. He rode hard to town and brought back the circuit doctor who happened to be passing through. Together, Beatrice and the doctor worked through the difficult delivery, and just before dawn their son was born. He was small but healthy, with a loud cry that echoed through the cabin. Zachary held him with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," Zachary whispered. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Nathan, after Zachary's father, and he became the center of their world. Beatrice had delivered dozens of babies, but nothing prepared her for the overwhelming love she felt for this tiny person they had created. Zachary was a devoted father, taking to parenthood with the same quiet competence he brought to everything else. He would walk Nathan around the cabin in the middle of the night, singing old cowboy songs to soothe him. He built a cradle with his own hands, carving it with intricate designs of horses and cattle. As Nathan grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. Zachary's horse breeding operation became known throughout the territory for quality stock. Beatrice's nursing school, as people had started calling her training sessions, produced capable women who spread throughout the county providing medical care. On their second anniversary, Beatrice and Zachary took a rare evening away from the ranch, leaving Nathan with a trusted neighbor. They rode out to their special spot by the river, the place where they had shared so many picnics during their courtship. "You ever regret it?" Zachary asked as they sat watching the sunset. "Giving up your life back east for this?" "Never. Not for a single moment." She leaned against him, his arm coming around her shoulders. "This life with you is everything I never knew I wanted. You gave me more than life when you pulled me from that river. You gave me purpose, partnership, love. You gave me the same. Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions. You made me want to live again, to build something lasting. We have built something lasting, together." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Beatrice reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. If she had not been foolish enough to cross that frozen river, if Zachary had not been riding by at exactly the right moment, if he had not been brave enough to risk himself for a stranger, her entire life would have been different. She would still be in Philadelphia, probably married to Robert Ashworth, living a comfortable but empty life. She would never have known this wild, beautiful country. She would never have known the satisfaction of bringing new life into the world or teaching others to do the same. She would never have known what it meant to be truly, deeply loved by a good man. "What are you thinking about?" Zachary asked softly. "About how grateful I am. For you, for our life, for everything." He kissed the top of her head. "I am the grateful one, every single day." The years passed, marked by the turning of seasons and the milestones of their growing family. When Nathan was 3, Beatrice gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah. 2 years after that came another son, James. The cabin that had once seemed spacious now bulged at the seams, and Zachary spent a year building an addition, creating more bedrooms and a larger living space. The children grew up wild and free, learning to ride almost before they could walk, helping with ranch chores as soon as they were able. Beatrice continued her nursing work, though she was more selective about which calls she answered, not wanting to be away from her family for extended periods. Her training program had grown, and several of her students had gone on to establish themselves as nurses in other towns. Zachary's ranch became one of the most successful in the territory. His horses were sought after from as far away as California and Texas. He hired ranch hands to help with the work, good men who became like family. On their 10th anniversary, Zachary surprised Beatrice with a trip to Tucson. They left the children with a trusted friend and spent 3 days in the city, staying in the finest hotel, eating in restaurants, and shopping in stores that seemed impossibly fancy after years of making do with the limited selection in Clifton's general store. On their last night over dinner, Zachary presented her with a gift. It was a locket on a gold chain, and inside were tiny photographs of their 3 children. "So you can keep them close to your heart, even when we are away from them," he said. She fastened it around her neck, her eyes bright with tears. "I love it. I love you. These 10 years with you have been the best of my life. I want you to know that. For me, too, I cannot imagine my life without you in it." The challenges of ranch life continued, of course. There were droughts that killed cattle and winters that were brutally hard. There were accidents and illnesses, financial setbacks and personal losses. But they faced everything together, drawing strength from their partnership. When Nathan was 12, he broke his leg badly in a fall from a horse. Beatrice set the bone herself, her hands steady despite her inner terror at seeing her child in pain. Zachary sat up with the boy every night for a week, reading to him and keeping him company. The leg healed straight and strong, though Nathan walked with a slight limp in cold weather for the rest of his life. Sarah, at 10, showed an aptitude for healing that reminded Beatrice of herself at that age. The girl would follow her mother on nursing calls, watching and learning with intense concentration. Beatrice began teaching her more formally, pleased to have her knowledge passed to the next generation. James, the youngest, had his father's way with horses. By the time he was 8, he could gentle the wildest colt, speaking to the animals in a language all his own. Zachary would watch him with pride, seeing his own love of horses reflected and magnified in his son. As the children grew toward adulthood, Beatrice sometimes looked at Zachary and marveled at how they had both changed and stayed the same. His hair was graying at the temples now, and lines creased his face from years of sun and wind. But his eyes still held that same storm gray intensity, and his rare smile still made her heart skip a beat. She knew she had changed too. Her hands were rougher now, marked by years of work. Her face showed the signs of age and sun. But she felt more herself than she ever had, comfortable in her own skin in a way she had never been in her youth. On a spring evening in their 18th year of marriage, Beatrice sat on the porch watching the sunset while Zachary finished up some work in the barn. Nathan, now 20, was working a section of the ranch on his own. Sarah, at 17, was in town helping with a difficult pregnancy. James, 15, was somewhere out in the hills with a half-wild horse he was determined to train. Beatrice heard Zachary's footsteps on the porch and smiled as he settled into the chair beside her. "Long day?" she asked. "Good day. Productive." He reached over and took her hand, their fingers interlacing in a gesture as natural as breathing. "Did you hear? The Henderson's daughter is getting married next month. The same girl you delivered 18 years ago. Time passes so quickly." "It does." He was quiet for a moment. "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" "About expanding the house again. Nathan will want to bring a wife home eventually, and Sarah too, when she finds the right person. I want them to know they always have a place here, that this is their home as much as ours." Beatrice squeezed his hand. "You are a good father, a good man." "I try. I had a good example in my own father for the years I had him. But I think I learned more about being a good man from watching you be a good woman. Your strength, your compassion, your determination to make a difference. We have made a difference together. Look at what we have built." She gestured at the ranch spread out before them, the well-maintained buildings, the the thriving herds, the land they had worked and loved. Look at the family we have raised. Look at the lives we have touched through your horses and my nursing. This is legacy, Zachary. This matters. You matter. Most of all, you matter. The years continued their march, bringing more changes. Nathan married a sweet-natured girl from town and brought her to live on the ranch, just as Zachary had hoped. They built them a small house on the property, close enough to be part of the family but far enough for privacy. Sarah, to everyone's surprise but Beatrice's, announced she did not want to marry. She wanted to dedicate herself to medicine, to learn everything she could and practice as a full-time nurse. Beatrice helped her apply to a nursing program in San Francisco, and though it broke her heart to see her daughter leave, she was fiercely proud. James stayed close to home, taking over more and more of the horse operation as Zachary began to slow down with age. He brought home a girl he had met at a horse auction in Tucson, a capable woman who could ride as well as any man, and they married in a simple ceremony at the ranch. Beatrice became a grandmother when she was 42, Nathan and his wife presenting her with a grandson. Holding that baby, seeing her son as a father, she felt the beautiful continuity of life, the passing of generations. "We are getting old," she said to Zachary that night as they lay in bed. "Speak for yourself, I am in my prime." She laughed and poked him in the ribs. "You are 51, we are both getting old." "Perhaps, but I would not change a thing. Every gray hair, every wrinkle, every ache and pain represents a life well lived. Even the scar on your shoulder from when that bull gored you, even that." He pulled her closer. "Every moment of this life with you has been worth it, even the hard parts. I feel the same." She rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Do you know what I was thinking about today? Tell me. That day you pulled me from the river, how terrified I was, how certain I was going to die, and then you appeared like something out of a story and saved me. I have told you before, any decent person would have done the same. But it was not any decent person, it was you, and that made all the difference." She propped herself up to look at him. "I told you that day that I owed you my life, but it is more than that. You gave me the life I was meant to live. You gave me love and partnership and purpose. You gave me a family and a home and a place to belong. That is a debt I can never repay." He reached up to cup her face. "You have already repaid it 1,000 times over. You gave me the same things, Beatrice. Before you, I was half a person going through the motions. You made me whole. You made me want to be better, to build something lasting. You gave me a reason to live instead of just existing." They made love that night with the tenderness of long familiarity, each touch a reaffirmation of their commitment to each other. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Beatrice felt the same contentment she had felt on their wedding night all those years ago. As they moved into their 60s, Zachary and Beatrice gradually stepped back from the day-to-day running of the ranch, leaving it in the capable hands of their sons and their sons' wives. They remained active and involved, but they also allowed themselves more leisure time. They took trips to places they had always wanted to see. They visited Sarah in San Francisco, where she had established herself as a respected nurse at a prestigious hospital. They traveled to Santa Fe and Denver, to Phoenix and El Paso, seeing the West as it changed and grew. But they always came back to the ranch, to the cabin where their life together had truly begun. Even with the additions and improvements over the years, that original room with its stone fireplace remained the heart of the house. On their 30th anniversary, their entire family gathered for a celebration. Nathan and his wife had 4 children now, ranging from 13 to 8. James and his wife had 3, all boys who were as wild about horses as their father. Sarah had come home from San Francisco, bringing with her a quiet woman she introduced as her dearest friend. though Beatrice saw the way they looked at each other and understood there was more to the story. The house was full of noise and laughter, children running everywhere, adults talking over each other. It was chaos of the most beautiful kind. That evening, after the children were in bed and the adults were gathered on the expanded porch, Nathan stood and raised his glass. "I want to make a toast," he said, "to my parents who showed all of us what love and partnership look like. You built this ranch from nothing, raised us to be good people, and created a legacy that will last for generations. Everything we have, everything we are, we owe to you." Everyone raised their glasses, voices joining in agreement. Zachary stood, pulling Beatrice to her feet beside him. "Your mother and I thank you for being here, for being who you are, but I want you all to know something. This ranch, this land, this is not our legacy. You are. Each of you and your children and their children someday. The love in this family, the bonds we share, that is what will last long after the ranch buildings have crumbled and the fences have fallen." He turned to Beatrice, his eyes bright. "And it all started because this stubborn woman tried to cross a frozen river on a winter day, and I happened to be riding by. Everything good in my life traces back to that moment." Beatrice felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "Everything good in my life traces back to you having the courage to risk yourself for a stranger. You gave me more than life that day, my love. You gave me everything." They kissed, to the applause and cheers of their family, and Beatrice felt the same flutter in her heart that she had felt the first time he kissed her all those years ago. The years that followed were gentler, quieter. Zachary's joints stiffened with arthritis, and Beatrice developed a persistent cough that worried her children despite her assurances that she was fine. They spent more time sitting on the porch, watching their grandchildren play, sharing memories of their years together. "Do you remember," Zachary said one afternoon, "that time early in our marriage when you tried to make bread and it came out hard as a rock? I used salt instead of sugar, and you ate it anyway, claiming it was delicious. I was being supportive. You were being a terrible liar." She laughed, the sound turning into a cough. When it passed, she continued, "Do you remember the year of the big drought when we thought we might lose everything? We survived it together. We survived everything together. We did. We really did." As Beatrice approached her 70th birthday, she knew her time was growing short. The cough that had persisted for months had worsened, and she recognized the signs even if her family wanted to deny them. Her lungs, always her weak point, were finally giving out. She made her peace with it. She had lived a full, rich life, loved and been loved in return. She had made a difference in her corner of the world. She had no regrets. Zachary, though, struggled with the impending loss. Beatrice would wake in the night to find him watching her, his face etched with sorrow. "I am not ready to lose you," he said one night, his voice breaking. "I know, my love, but death comes for us all eventually. I have had 70 good years and more than 30 of them with you. That is more than many people get. It is not enough. It will never be enough." She took his hand, pressed it to her cheek. "Then let us make the most of the time we have left. No more sadness, just love and gratitude for what we have shared." So they did. For the next few months, they loved each other fiercely, openly, holding nothing back. They told stories to their grandchildren, passed on wisdom to their children, and spent quiet evenings together, often not speaking, just being in each other's presence. When the end came, it was peaceful. Beatrice was in their bed, surrounded by family, with Zachary holding her hand. "I love you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "always and forever." "I love you too," Zachary replied, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for every moment we had together." She smiled, squeezed his hand once more, and closed her eyes. Her breathing grew shallower, then stopped. Zachary held her for a long time, unwilling to let go while their children wept around them. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half the county. Beatrice had touched so many lives through her nursing work, and the stories people told at the service painted a picture of a woman who had given freely of herself, who had made a real difference in her community. She was buried on a hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple headstone that read, "Beatrice Young, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and healer. She saved lives and changed hearts." Zachary visited her grave every day, sitting beside it and talking to her about the ranch, about their children and grandchildren, about his memories of their life together. "The children want me to move into town," he told her gravestone one afternoon. "They think I am too isolated out here. But this is where you are. This is where we built our life. I am not ready to leave it." He lived for 3 more years without her, years that seemed to last forever and pass in the blink of an eye. He saw his great-grandchildren born, watched the ranch continue to prosper under his son's management, and slowly, inevitably, felt his own body begin to fail. When his time came, he faced it with the same quiet courage he had brought to everything else in his life. His children gathered around his bed, and he smiled at them. "Do not be sad," he said. "I am going to be with your mother again. I have missed her every day since she left, and soon we will be together." His last words were her name, spoken with love and longing. They buried him beside Beatrice on the hill, and his headstone read, "Zachary Young, beloved husband, father, and grandfather. He saved a life and found his own." The ranch continued for generations, passed down through their children and grandchildren. The story of how Zachary pulled Beatrice from the frozen river became family legend, told and retold at gatherings, a reminder of how love can grow from a single moment of courage. Sarah, who never married but built a distinguished career in nursing, established a training hospital in Clifton in her mother's name. The Beatrice Young School of Nursing operated for nearly 70 years, training hundreds of nurses who spread throughout the West. Nathan's line continued the ranching tradition, and a great-great-grandson eventually turned part of the original ranch into a museum, preserving the cabin where Zachary and Beatrice had lived and loved. James's descendants continued the horse breeding operation, and young ranch horses became known throughout the country for their quality and temperament. The family stayed close over the generations, bound by the legacy of love and partnership that Zachary and Beatrice had modeled. On anniversaries and holidays, they would gather at the ranch, and someone would always visit the hilltop graves, placing fresh flowers and sharing stories. The tale of the frozen river rescue, of the cowboy who saved a woman's life and found his own salvation in the process, became more than family history. It became a reminder that the most important things in life often come from unexpected moments, from courage in the face of danger, from the choice to risk everything for a stranger. And on that hilltop, beneath the wide Arizona sky, 2 headstones stood side by side, weathered by wind and time but still standing strong. Just as the love they represented had weathered every storm and stood the test of time. The end.